What's up everybody, I'm Matt.
And I'm Beth.
And today we're going to be reviewing the interior in the 2020 Buick Encore GX. So the Encore GX is not the same as the regular Encore. It's a completely different model that for some reason they gave the same name to. So the GX is a very important differentiator between the two different models. And so the GX version here is a little bit larger. It's obviously a completely new platform and stuff. So this is definitely the newer of the two Encores. And having the extra space and stuff is nice, which we'll get to more in a minute. But as far as the interior, so this is sharing the same platform as the Chevy Trailblazer. And much of this interior, the bones of it are the same, but they did, of course, dress things up a little bit here for the Buick version to make it feel a little bit more premium inside. And so the first thing here, getting into the seats, these are some nice leather seats here, which have some perforations in them, which kind of have a little bit of a cool design. And for, a crossover, I think they have, pretty decent bolstering, and they've actually been pretty soft and comfortable. I think maybe even a little more comfortable than the Trailblazer seats, possibly.
Yeah, I definitely think they're more comfortable. However, because they are leather, they are a little bit firm, but I feel like if you had this car for a while, they would get a little bit more broken in.
Yeah, and so I think that could definitely help soften these up, but overall they're still pretty good. They have heating here in them, but you don't have any cooling function, which is something you can get in a couple of the competitors, but that is pretty hard to find in this segment still. But they're also power seats with a power lumbar adjustment, which is nice.
And even the passenger seat has all of those features as well, including the lumbar. It's really nice to have these, and with the Trailblazer you just didn't have any of those. It is crazy how nice it is to be able to adjust your height with this vehicle and also have that lumbar as well.
Yeah, and so I mean the big thing with the Trailblazer is you felt like you were sitting up so high in that. And so being able to control that so you don't feel like you're like sitting on top of the car is an important differentiator that if you're on the taller side, you might want to go for the Encore GX just for that fact alone, especially if you have tall passengers at any point in time.
Yeah, it was definitely super nice to be able to put my seat lower so that I was more comfortable and didn't feel like I was gonna like pop out of the roof anytime soon.
Yeah, speaking of the roof, this one does not have the panoramic moonroof. You can get that in these vehicles, and that does take away a little bit of headroom, especially in the back seat, which I'll explain more later. But so that is an option you can get. This one does not have that. If you want to see what that roof looks like, you can go watch the Trailblazer interior review. That one did have it. But anyway, moving on to the steering wheel here in the Encore GX. It's a nice wheel. It's a very thin rim, but that's appropriate for a crossover like this, and has some nice trim on it. I like the contrast stitching. Has a good 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches. Just a few buttons here on it, and then a couple of buttons here on the back to change volume and radio stations and stuff. But it's a nice wheel, and it also is worth noting is a heated steering wheel. Now that is another option that this Essence trim has. This Essence trim, by the way, has a bunch of options loaded up, and so this one, as tested, is $33,465. And it's worth noting this is a front wheel drive version. You don't even have all wheel drive at that price point. Obviously you can get a cheaper Encore, and obviously GM gives discounts that are a little more generous than others sometimes. So pricing will vary, but it's just nice that the Encore GX is one of the rare few that gives you a heated steering wheel even as an option, because even in some of the nicest competitors, that's not an option. So it's great to have that. That is a very nice feature on cold winter days and stuff. I love having heated steering wheels. Next though are the gauges here in the Encore GX, which are standard GM gauges. I do like the fonts. They're a little bit more, I guess, expensive looking in this than the Chevy Trailblazer, which had very parts bin Chevy gauge fonts and kind of look cheap. These look a little more expensive, and you also have a nice color digital portion there in the middle, which can show you, your speed readout or your trip information, but it also does show things like your navigation instructions, also your audio, those types of things. And so I really like these little screens they have in these new GM products. I think it's really nice. Also, this one has the optional head-up display, which isn't the best head-up display, but it is pretty par for the course in this segment. So this one also, like many of the others, uses this little plexiglass thing that pops up every time you turn on the car and projects the speed onto that. It's okay. It's kind of cool. You can actually have it so it'll show a tack up there, which is surprising considering this is not a sporty vehicle. But so it's okay. A lot of the other competitors do have the same type of setup, but it's worth noting if you want to have a head-up display that doesn't have a little piece of glass in front of you, the Mazda CX-30, that one actually projects it onto the windshield, and so that has the better heads-up display. But this is still nice, and again, it's just an option. You don't have to get it if you don't want want it. Also, while we're up on the dashboard here, it's worth noting some of the materials here are a little bit nicer in the Encore GX. So you have, you know, some padding here and some fake stitching on this dash pad, which does feel a little bit nicer than, again, the Chevy probably does. You also have a little bit more padding here on your elbow rests here on the doors, and that feels a little more expensive. All the plastics feel a tiny bit better than when you get in the Chevy. They just have a little bit more give, where it's hard, scratchy plastic for a lot of the stuff in the Chevy. There are still some parts that are cheap, which we'll get to in a minute. But coming over to the center of the dashboard here, that you have this 8-inch Buick Infotainment system, which is the same as the Chevrolet MyLinks and everything. And in this, it actually has just a tiny bit of a different font, but all of the icons and everything are identical. And so the important thing to note here, though, about this system is that it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is not wireless. The 2021 Encore GX, it is wireless. I would highly recommend getting a 2021 just so you don't have to plug your phone in every time you want to use your smartphone integration. And the Chevy Trailblazer we had did have that wireless integration, since that was a 21 model, and it is really nice to have it as wireless. So unless you don't mind plugging in your phone, you're really going to use it or something, then maybe, you know, 2020 is fine, but I would definitely recommend waiting for the 2021.
Yeah, and I will say how crazy fast it connects, because like I said in the other review, when I was just sitting in the car and the car was on and he was out grabbing something real quick and he came back, he wasn't even in the car yet and it turned on. So I just think it's crazy fast how responsive that is. And if you like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto for that matter, I think that it's really worth it.
Yeah, so important thing to note there, get a 21, I think you'll be happy you did. But otherwise, you know, it's pretty good as far as, you know, tuning radio stations and things like that. Although, whenever you do use the on-screen controls for changing the radio station, it insists on bringing up this whole sub-menu so you can like swipe through radio stations instead of just letting you go to the next station. You have to, it's like a double tap instead of just one tap. Now, if you do use these physical buttons here, that will just advance one station and, you know, do that. And of course, once you have your presets set and everything, that's not going to really be an issue. But just an extra little step there I'm not in love with, but otherwise it, you know, all works great. Also, you can get a Bose stereo system that is combined with this infotainment system. I believe it's the same as the Bose system you can get in the Chevy, and if that's the case, then it's just like one extra speaker. But you know, I think it ends up giving you a grand total of like 7 speakers or something. Nothing impressive. Most of the stereos in this segment aren't impressive. If you do want a really good stereo and a subcompact crossover, the Mazda CX-30 again is the king in that regard. And so that's the one to check out if you do want a really good stereo, which is also a Bose system, but the way they designed it in the Mazda is 10 times better than any of the other subcompact crossovers as far as the stereos go. But anyway, so that's just one little thing to note there. But anyway, coming down, you have, you know, a nice little volume knob here, which does have some knurling to it, even though it is rubbery, but that's nice. And then you have these climate controls. And my problem is the same as my problem with the Trailblazer with these controls, where they wiggle. Like, it is loose and cheap feeling, and this is an issue because this isn't a cheap subcompact crossover. This one, again, like I said, over $33,000, and you know, whenever these starting price is 25. At 25, okay, maybe, even though a lot of the competitors don't have that at 25. But especially when you're into the 30s, there is no reason why any button in this vehicle should be loose or cheap feeling. But it's just kind of strange because, like, coming down to the gear shifter, like, this has this like nice leather feeling to it, and then the buttons to change the gears if you want to do manual shifting here in this, that's actually like a piece of real metal, and like no one is going to be manually shifting their Buick Encore GX. Why they spent the money on making that button really nice feeling metal, but then the stuff you touch all the time, like the volume knob or the climate controls, is plastic? Like, just kind of a head scratcher as far as the decision making process there. So I would, you know, in the future swap that and, you know, put that metal in places where people are actually going to be using it. It's just kind of a strange, you know, selection there. But anyway, moving on beyond the materials in the Encore GX. As far as storage space goes in it, it is pretty good for this class of vehicles. So you have pockets here in the doors with a bottle holder, and then in the center here you have this nice little cubby, which does have a wireless charging pad. The way this one is configured, that is just an option, but it does have that, and it's kind of rubberized and has little notches so it holds your phone in better, so that's pretty well designed. You also will see a USB jack, USB-C jack, an auxiliary jack, and a power outlet. You have all that right out in the open, and your SD card slot for your maps, since this one does have navigation as well. But great to have all of that. You also have two cup holders that are a good size, and this extra little bonus bin right behind the cup holders, which is really large, and you can fit, I don't know, your phone in there if you want, if you don't want to put it in the front or whatever. It's a really large space. And then you have this center armrest, which has some padding to it. It doesn't feel super expensive. It's not leather or anything, but it's soft, and so I appreciate that.
However, it does sit really high. So in your normal car, when you're sitting really high and not sitting lower, that would be nice. But here it just feels like it's a little bit too high, especially for me and the height that we're sitting at right now.
Yeah, and the Trailblazer had this same issue. Even though we were sitting up higher in the Trailblazer, it still was too high. So like, this whole thing could be dropped down, several inches and be a little more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, it's I guess nice. It does have a center armrest, because that is an option, believe it or not, in some of the cheaper competitors. But anyway, you open that up, and then you'll see a narrow but a very deep area here. And so first though, in the top, you'll see there's this little like shelf that you can remove. Unfortunately, that's not deep enough to actually store like my sunglasses case, so I didn't find that very useful. But if you have, like, again, another place you want to put a cell phone, that could work there. But anyway, you can pop that out, and then again, you see a massive space in there. And so really great. Again, for a vehicle this small, oftentimes you don't get a lot of space, and so I think this is a little bit better than average for sure. But in the center armrest area, I still have to mention a couple other things as far as materials go. You have very cheap plastic for all these bins and stuff, and again, most of the vehicles in this class aren't going to be super nice feeling, but at the price point this is at, that's where this needs to be better. And the Mazda CX-30, every material in that interior is nice, and that maxed out is like 30 grand tops, like 29 and a half. This is several thousand more without all-wheel drive, and it's still, just feels kind of cheap in here, and that's kind of the struggle with the Encore. I mean, you do have a little bit of padding here, like for your knee area there. I don't have anything here because my knee doesn't really come in contact with this plastic area.
Yeah, but even with that being said, there's no way I'm gonna sit that close to the dashboard, so there's literally no way my knee could even fit there unless I was somebody that was really tall. Maybe then that would work.
Or if
but
you had the seat up really far, maybe if you needed tons of space in the back or something.
Yeah.
So again, it's just nice that they included that, but kind of a strange decision as far as where to put the nice stuff in here. You do have some padding here on the dashboard, which is soft and stuff, but it's also worth noting, going back to storage space, that the Trailblazer has an extra little bin here on the passenger side. You don't get that here in the Buick, and instead you have a more stylistic dashboard. So if you do value every little square inch of storage space in your interior, the Trailblazer is going to be the better pick in that regard as well. But anyway, moving on to the back seat here in the Encore GX. It is, one of the more spacious ones in this segment, and so that's kind of, the Encore GX kind of bridges the gap between the typical subcompact crossover and the full-blown compact crossovers, the larger stuff, the RAV4 and CR-V. And so I'm 5'9", I'm sitting behind myself. I actually have about 2 inches of legroom to spare back there, which doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of the others you have like an inch if you're lucky. Some it's like really tight, and that is one of the shortcomings of the Mazda CX-30 actually, is that my knees are almost resting against the seat back, and there's not as roomy of a back seat. So this does have an advantage over the Mazda in that regard. Headroom is also very good here, again, because we do not have that panoramic moonroof. If we did have that, like I was in the Trailblazer, it was a little bit tight as far as headroom. I mean, I fit, but if you were over 6 feet tall, it might get a little tight. So I'd recommend, if you do have tall rear passengers, definitely don't get the moonroof, because that will cut down on your headroom a little bit. Anyway, though, whenever you're looking forward, you'll see that you have a regular power outlet as well as a USB-C jack and another USB jack, and that's way more hookups than any of the other competitors in this segment. So this and the Trailblazer both have that amount of hookups, and that's great. Most vehicles you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 USB jacks, so to have those and a regular plug is unheard of, and so really nice. There's also little pockets in those doors, and there's a fold-down center armrest with 2 cup holders built into it as well. And so overall, it's a pretty nice back seat again for this segment. Trunk space here in the Encore GX is also pretty much towards the top of its class, because it is a little bit bigger, but it's not way bigger than any of the other competitors really. It's pretty much on par. But the nice thing about the Encore GX and the Trailblazer both have this is that you have kind of a lowering floor. So you have, if you want to have a flat load floor there, you can have it on its higher position, or you can drop it down to that lower position. It gives you a little bit of extra depth there, and that's really great. Beneath that floor, you're only going to see a spare tire. There isn't any dedicated cubbies or anything back, underneath there, but there is some extra space. You could put some stuff there, blankets or something if you wanted, I guess. Again, for this class vehicle, pretty good as far as that goes. But yeah, so that's about everything as far as this interior goes, but I also have to mention, again, getting back to the pricing of this, because yes, this has a little bit more room than most of the subcompact stuff and a little bit more trunk space maybe, but at this price point, I mean, 33.5 without all-wheel drive, you can get almost a fully loaded Honda CR-V, which is going to be way bigger with a backseat, way bigger with a hatch, and all-wheel drive, has all the same features this does, and is going to feel just as nice inside as this does for the same money. And that's kind of the struggle with these subcompact crossovers, is once they get beyond the 20s and they get into the $30,000 range, I mean, you can get an identically equipped next segment up vehicle, and RAV4s, stuff like that. Although the RAV4 is a tiny bit more expensive, but I know that, again, you can get more discounts probably on the Buick than you could on a Honda, but just note that the Encore GX, its value is going to come down to how good of a deal you can get. If you can get a great deal on one of these and a ton of money off, it can make a lot of sense. If not, then I think the Mazda CX-30 is going to be the more luxurious pick. It is the most luxurious, the nicest driving, the best sounding stereo. It just basically, the Mazda CX-30 is the king in this segment, hands down. And I think the Hyundai Kona and the Kia Seltos also give you more power, about the same amount of space, and all the same kind of features and stuff for way less money. And so that's kind of the struggle of the Buick, and also the Chevy. I mean, the Chevy's a little bit pricey. Obviously, that's a little bit cheaper than this, but I don't see this being a huge leap over the Chevy to justify that extra price tag, and especially at 33.5, this doesn't make any sense, unfortunately. If you do get a good deal, this could be a solid pick, and otherwise it's a nice little vehicle. There's nothing wrong with it aside from the pricing, in my opinion. Yeah,
I think it is pretty nice, but once again, for the price, I feel like you could get some better things.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all our thoughts here on the Encore GX. Let us know your thoughts on the GX version of the Encore in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.